Welcome to the continuing part of our program on telephone etiquette. I would like to highlight for you a few points about the actual telephone itself. How do you actually pick that phone up? How do you hold the actual instrument? Many people hold the telephone in different ways. Some people actually hold the instrument and hold the mouthpiece, which is where you speak into. They actually cup that in their hand. So they're not actually holding the arm of the receiver, they're holding the actual mouthpiece. Really, that's not a comfortable way of holding it. I do think it's preferable just to pick it up and hold it by the arm. The arm is the central part between the piece where you hear and also the piece through which you speak. Next up, do not put the receiver on its side on the desk. If you put the receiver down on the desk, don't forget, anything around it is very, very sensitive and everything is heard very, very clearly. People know also when you put that phone down, and that's not a good thing to do, unless you're telling them that you need to put it down for some particular reason. So really handle the instrument correctly. Muffle the microphone with the palm of the hand, not the fingertips, if you do need to make any vocal aside during your conversation. That means if you're talking and you do need to say something and you don't want the caller to hear, then instead of putting your fingertips over it, you have to put your whole palm of your hand. The palm of your hand, that particular part, is flatter. And that means it's going to be stronger in trying to muffle or quieten the sound so as it doesn't get to the microphone and then off to the caller or the speaker on the other end. So these are just some brief pointers. Because quite often you do realize that when you're talking to somebody, you can hear things through the microphone. And certainly you know yourself that that doesn't lend a very professional kind of feeling when you get all these other noises going on. Some people I know, if they've tried to muffle the microphone so the caller doesn't hear, they tend to put it away, they hold it away, or they put it on their chest, thinking that the sound itself will be very well muffled. But really don't do that. Because even the slightest movement on your clothes, the microphone picks that up, and you hear this sound at the other end. So these are just some very small pointers to remember. Don't think too much about it, but the thing is you do need to regard that instrument carefully and make sure that you're using it and handling it correctly as well. I'd like to move on now to some conversation techniques that are very, very acceptable responses. We are going to look at all different kinds of situations and all the kinds of things that you might need to say. And these tips are going to be very useful for you. Sometimes we want to say something, we have an idea of what we want to say, but we say it in the wrong way. So let's have a look at this particular chart. On the left side, you want to mean that, for example, he is out. That's something that you really want to mean when you say it. That's the message you want to tell the caller. No, he is out. He's not in, he's out. Or she is out. However, you have to tell the caller in a different way. It would be preferable and more acceptable, for example, in this first line, that you say it this way. He is not in the office at the moment. Would you like to leave a message on his voicemail? Now that is a better way and a more acceptable way of saying he is out. So these are better phrases on the right-hand side of this chart that you should use when you're talking to your caller. Let's look at the next one. Please do never say this, I don't know where he is. Unless, of course, you're talking to a friend. But in business, if somebody is asking for somebody, you would never say, I don't know where he is. Of course, that's what you mean. But you would tell the caller, he has stepped out of the office. Would you like to leave a message on his voicemail? You can say that again as an example. He has stepped out of the office. That's quite acceptable, and you're not being too direct and negative in your response. People actually understand, okay, he's not there. But you've said it in a positive way. Always remember, try to leave something positive for the caller on the phone. And this is doing that. Let's look at the third line. Never really say, he's in the men's room or he's in the ladies' room. Never say that. Of course, you mean that. And you need to tell the caller that, but you tell the caller in a different way. You could say, he is not at his desk right now. Would you like to leave a message on his voicemail? This is acceptable. You could also just say, would you like to leave a message as well? That's quite okay. So we know that he's probably in the gents or in the ladies, and that's what you mean. That's the message you want to give the caller, but you tell the caller something different. And you tell them in a way that's going to make them feel all right. It's not too direct or negative. Let's look at the next line. Now, this is also something that you really don't say. You shouldn't say it anyway, because it implies somebody might be late, or they're not thinking, or they're not keeping appointments. He hasn't come in yet. Now, that's very honest. It's honest saying he hasn't come in yet, but really, a better way to say that is to tell the caller, I expect him shortly. Would you like to leave a message? Or, I expect him shortly. Would you like to leave a message on his voicemail? Do you remember that some companies now, each position has their own personal voicemail on their phone? So this is why it may be used. It's more personal and direct as well, rather than a secretary or receptionist taking a message. So there you have it. I expect him shortly. This is positive. This is courteous, and it's much more acceptable than he hasn't come in yet. So do you see the difference? I certainly hope so. Let's take a look at the next example. He took the day off. Now, certainly, you might like to say that, but you would tell the caller something different. You could say, he is out of the office for the day. Can someone else help you, or would you like to leave a message on his voicemail? Simply saying, and quite nicely, that somebody is out of the office for the day is very polite. It's very good usage of English. And here you are saying a negative in a positive way. To the next line. Perhaps you might want to tell the person who's calling that he doesn't want to be disturbed. Now, this is something that makes people very angry when they hear this, because their call might be important as well, and they feel that they should be put through to that person. So be very careful, and it really is a better rule to change it to something better than that. Here is an example of what you can change it to. He is unavailable at the moment. Would you like to leave a message? Or would you like to leave a message on his voicemail? There you go. That's a very nice way of saying that I can't put you through. He doesn't want to be disturbed. Do you see the difference? And finally, let's take a look at the next, what you want to say, but actually shouldn't really say at all. She is busy, or he is busy. He's busy. I often get that, and I really do not like that response at all from the receptionist or the secretary. And that's not really very professional to say that. Everybody's busy. Did you know that? You're busy, I'm busy. Everybody is busy. So it's simply not the correct way to say that to the caller. The way to tell the caller that someone is busy is you could use this kind of response. She is unavailable at the moment. Would you like to leave a message on her voicemail? So this is better. She is unavailable at the moment. This is one example of a positive response. You would certainly not say she is busy. So here are some examples that you can put in your toolkit of responses that you use when you have callers on the phone. Practice them. Try to find out which one works for you. And do bear in mind that you can change them a little bit depending on your English usage. Certainly go and do that, whatever comes out smoothly, but make sure that whatever you do change it to certainly is positive. Please practice them. Please use them. And you'll find that it will send a very nice professional message to the person at the other end. Let's continue and take a look at some other conversation techniques and acceptable responses you can use. If you find that you answer a caller's question with, "No, I don't know," what does that suggest to you? It suggests that you're really not interested, perhaps, or you're not caring about the caller. So it might be better to say it this way. "No, I'm sorry, I don't know. But Mr. X may have an answer for that problem. Shall I transfer you to him?" That is a very acceptable response, rather than just saying, "No, I don't know." Or you might be able to use this kind of phrase. "If you would like to hold for a minute, I'll get Mr. X to see if he can have an answer for you." That is some alternative response you can have as well. So here you can vary your responses to, instead of just being abrupt with "No, I don't know," you need to elaborate on that. You need to certainly make sure that you fill in the gaps and you try to help the caller. These particular comments above that we've just gone through at least suggest to the caller that you are interested in trying to help them. If you don't elaborate and just have a short, abrupt "No, I don't know," then that means you're not interested. And remember, you do need to convey that to your caller. If you want the name of the caller, and perhaps you haven't caught it or you don't know it yet, then you can use this kind of phrase or these alternatives. "May I tell him who called?" And that's quite acceptable. People do understand that. You can also say it this way. "When he returns, may I tell him who called?" And of course then the caller realizes that you want their name. They will say, "Oh yes, it's Mr. Jones," or "Yes, it's Amy calling." So these are also acceptable ways of asking questions and acceptable ways of saying that you don't know. Do try to use them in your techniques when you're on the phone. They will lend professionalism to your conversation, and then of course the caller will feel good about the telephone call. Now we look at conversations and techniques that you might use when you are actually leaving the line, when you need to leave it during a conversation. For some reason you may have to go and get something, or you may have to go and find more information about a particular thing. So you need to say how long it will take, and then you can use these techniques. Ask the caller if she will hold the line, or if she would prefer that you take a message. You do need to do that. You don't tell them to hold the line. You have to ask your caller if they can hold the line. So you're asking permission. Then you can also check in with your caller if you have to be away from the line for more than a minute. Come back to them. Don't leave them dangling, we say. Don't leave them loose on the other end. They're wondering what's going on. So check in with them. And if it's for more than a minute, you have to do this. You can also say, "It will take a few minutes more to find that information. Do you wish to wait, or shall I call you back?" So these are things you can reply in this way. Don't forget, always ask permission. That way you're getting a better response from your caller. You should avoid things like saying, just a moment, then leave the line. You need to tell them what you're going to do. If you just say, just a moment, and then nothing comes, your caller may prefer to receive that information later, rather than waiting out the time of your search. Your search may take a bit too long. You do need to remember to get the customer's attention. When you come back to your line, you thank him for waiting or apologize for taking more time than you had anticipated would be necessary. And now that you have his attention again, give him the information. So these are some things you need to bear in mind when you need to leave that line and go away and get information. Do try to practice them. Do remember always to check back in with your caller. Don't leave them loose. Don't leave them alone for more than a minute. Don't leave them hanging, wondering what's going on. And also thank them when you do come back and apologize for taking more time than was necessary. Here are some techniques that you can use when you are ending the call, when you are having to close up the call. Help your caller come to the close with a hint that your conversation has come to an end. Let them know by what you are actually saying that you're beginning to end that call, that it's not going to last much longer, and that you're preparing to say goodbye. When you are listening, keep the initiative here too, whether you are waiting for that break in the conversation or whether you are listening to your conversation's complete story. Let's take a look now at techniques you can use when you are closing the call. If you initiated the call, then you need to review the information details. Whatever business that may have been, you need to go through them and be sure that the details you have written down are correct details. So as you start to close the call, review the contents of your conversation. Here is the only time you've got left to be able to make sure that everything that you have heard and you've written down is correct. So it's time to do that. Next up, in closing a call, if you have received the call and you want to repeat, therefore, to your caller the business of the call, make certain that your caller has understood correctly what you have told them. So here we see whether you have made the call or whether you have received the call. This is the time when you're starting to close that you make sure all that you've talked about is correct. You just do a bit of a recap or a review of the details that were the subject of your conversation. If you have to end a prolonged call, that means the call has gone on, and we see here that sometimes this is a bit difficult. The call has gone on for a long time. So when you wish to end a prolonged conversation, the accepted rule gives the caller the prerogative of closing a conversation. If you have been the caller and the other person's gone on and on and on, then you can really end that call. When you wish to end a prolonged conversation, the accepted rule really gives the caller the right of closing the conversation. They made the call, and therefore generally they will end that conversation. If you have placed the call, in this particular instance, even if your partner in the conversation seems reluctant to close the contact, it is your privilege to end the call and to end up the conversation with a kind of polite sort of, well then we will take care of that matter. These are things you can use in a polite way to try to end such a long conversation. Or you could say, "Thank you for your information," or whatever appropriately refers to the original purpose of the call, and then you politely say goodbye. So you have to use your skills here as a great communicator. You don't really want to offend the other party. So just be careful. Don't be too abrupt. Try to use techniques and words that politely and courteously end that long call. It really does depend if the nature of the call has become angry or aggressive as well. But generally speaking, just in a prolonged conversation that's gone on for quite a long time and it's time to finish, these are techniques that you can adopt in order to finish up that call. So remember, well, then we will take care of that matter. That does indicate when you use those words in English that, okay, it's time to sort of finish it up. So these are signals to the listener. And also by using your tone of voice, they will get the signal and the message that, all right, it's time to close the call. If you have received a call and that call has been quite lengthy, the tone of voice which conveys a kind of self-assurance is the key to making this comment work. The comment follows like this: "I've enjoyed talking with you. I do wish I had more time to discuss this matter with you. However, that is not possible at the moment. But thank you for calling." So here we see with this polite sentence and way of saying goodbye and leaving this prolonged call, you haven't really offended anybody. Of course, they may have something more to say after that, but you do need to use your skills to handle that. But generally here, use your tone of voice, which conveys a self-assurance, and it is a key to making this kind of comment work. It is very difficult sometimes to leave the telephone, to leave a caller who wants to talk and may be a very good subject, and they may just be lonely, for example, or they may just want to share a lot of things with you. But you do need to know that there are times when you have to cut these things off. You can't go on and on and on. You have your job to perform. So take these techniques and try to put them into your toolkit and apply them when they are needed. Next up, let's take a look at techniques you can use when you are gathering information. And the most important thing here is to summarize the business at the close of the call. If the purpose of your call was to gather data or gather some important details about something, then this is very important that you make a summary and also you have a pencil in your hand, paper, etc. when you actually answer that call for the first time. You don't want to lose any opportunity in the time of that call. So as soon as you answer that ring, as soon as you begin your conversation, then you do need to start writing things down while you're listening. Have a pencil in your hand when you place the call as well. If you are doing the calling, don't start fumbling around to look for that pencil. Write down names, dates, times, places, and items. And an idea about all of the information that you do jot down is to use your notes during that conversation for letters or memos confirming the conversation later. Don't scrunch them up and throw them away straight after, thinking you can remember things. File them all, staple them together, or put them in a document, type them up, and then throw away your original notes. But they are your record. So gathering information are reasons why people make lots of calls, and therefore use a technique to show that you're ready, and at the end of that call, summarize everything at the close so you've got everything there. There's nothing that has been left out. Now we're going to move on to another area of telephone etiquette. We've talked about different things that you can say or tell the caller, making negatives into positives. We've talked about a few techniques that can help you when you're dealing with certain responses on the phone. And now let's take a look here at being transferred. Let me ask you, do you like being transferred? Actually, nobody does. Nobody does, because more often than not you get lost or you get cut off and then you've got to start calling all over again. But sometimes it is necessary because we come in on the wrong number or we're not getting to the right person. So the idea about telephone etiquette and being transferred is that you need to look at this particular activity very, very carefully if you want to have a good image to the caller. You will certainly be appreciated by the caller if you do the right thing and you transfer people very well. There are ways of transferring people. Are you aware of that? I'm sure you are. There are some do's and don'ts about transferring. And just like you and I, we both don't like being transferred, it is a reality and it does have to happen, no matter how sophisticated these automated answering services are today. So in transferring a call, you do need to educate the person on the other end. You do need to let them know why you can't help them. For example, you can say something like this. Mr. Smith, Peter in Pepper Services has the information you need on transferring your credits. May I transfer you to Peter now? And wait for the caller's response. So here you see, you educate the caller, then you ask permission to transfer, and you wait for the caller's response. It's quite simple. If you say, I'm transferring you now, hold on, the caller may not want to be transferred. Quite often, though, people say, what will I do if they say, no, don't transfer me? You asked permission to transfer, then they say, no, don't transfer me. What do? Research shows that actually 98% of the time, the caller will say, okay. They understand that being transferred is going to get a solution. And they are willing to go along with it. But the thing is, they just like to be asked first. Do you remember that point? 2% of the time they say no, and that's a very, very small percentage. So don't worry about that. You will find that they will be transferred. If, of course, you get somebody who is in that 2%, then you do have to respect the wishes of that caller. Don't just start to blame them. You do have to respect that, no, they don't want to be transferred. Sometimes I myself do not want to be transferred because I may have been transferred 10 times already. So if that is the case, respect the caller's wishes. Okay, accept it. Then the best option at this point is to take the name, take their number, and have the appropriate department call them back. That is really the best option to that 2% of your callers who don't want to be transferred. And next up, don't forget to follow up. Go to that department or ring that department and say, did you call that person back? Did the call back actually happen, in other words? So this is excellent etiquette. It is the proper way to handle those callers who don't want to be transferred. Now, when you are transferring calls, you do have to transfer them quickly and correctly. Without a doubt, this is the first approach and the best approach you should take. Correct transfer of a call requires that the one who answers the telephone to get adequate information for correct referral. So you do need to get the right information as to who you should send that person to. Who are you going to transfer them to? The lady who sits in the cubicle down the hall? No. you're going to find out the correct place to transfer that call. And when a call must be transferred, the best procedure is to tell the caller, first of all, to whom she will be transferred, because people like to have a name. For example, you can say, I'll transfer you to Mrs. Brown, or I'll give you Miss Brown. She handles those matters. Just a moment, please. This is correct. Therefore, the caller, if they get lost for some reason, knows that it's Miss Brown that she was supposed to speak to. So be sure you are transferring the call, of course, to the proper person and the proper department. So, be quick and be correct. And make sure that your caller is happy with that and knows the name of the person that they're being transferred to. That sounds fairly simple, doesn't it? It really is quite straightforward if you follow the etiquette, if you follow the guidelines. Always remember to ask permission as well along the way. How are you at taking messages? This is also a very important part of your telephone etiquette. When you take messages, you should consider these points. Write a message even if the caller indicates they will call back. You need to make sure that you write it anyway. That's important. And on that message, you need to include the time and the date of the call, and also when that caller might call back. You do need to write very clearly, legibly, so that your handwriting is understood by anyone, in fact. So do make a note of that point. And also verify the caller's name and phone number by repeating the information. You can also ask how they spell their name as well if you're not sure. That's not a bad thing to do, because then you are very clear with who that person is. Sometimes there are different spellings of names as well in the English language, so it might pay to just ask for the correct spelling. In taking a message, include as much information as possible to help the message recipient return the call. Imagine, for example, that you are the one that has to call back. So what kind of information do you need? So think of the recipient as you would think of yourself and what information you need to make the call back. Also, an important part of taking messages. Sign or initial the message slip and deliver the message promptly. This is important, so it's you being accountable actually for that message being taken. And then deliver that message. Don't leave it hanging around or give it to somebody else to take to party A, B or C. Really go promptly to deliver the message, if that's possible, by yourself. If you leave it laying around on your desk, it may get lost or you may forget about it, and that is not very good. It's not very professional in your position. So these are hints for taking messages. Also, you could have a telephone log. A telephone log is really a more formal way, not just a piece of paper that you write the message on. It could be a special book, a message book, which is often used to record messages. And this becomes one of the accountable tools or recording documents that officers do follow through with in their daily business. So everything is very clear there, and people know where to go to look at the telephone log for messages if they've been out of the office. Also, the top copy or original, it can be given to the message recipient, and a copy is kept in the book for future reference. These are self-carboning copies, and they're specially produced for this purpose. So it might pay that you have a telephone log if you don't have one already in your office setup. I think these are really good because small pieces of paper lying around do get lost, and people really don't pay attention to individual pieces of little paper floating around. In taking messages, ensure correct information, and as I said, get the correct spelling of the caller's name. Ask them. They don't mind. People are very happy to spell their name because they know that you're being thorough and that the person will know exactly who you are without any misunderstanding. So don't be afraid to ask, as I said. And also, when you are taking messages, you do need to maintain confidentiality. Think of that point. With written telephone messages, you have to be confidential and do not repeat anything that's confidential in terms of information over the phone. So these are pointers that will help you when you're taking messages. But if you are in a system where you have voicemail on individual desks, then that really does help you out in this. Technology is bringing a lot of new things to us. Well, voicemail is not so new, but the fact that in a large organization, each desk or each number can have a voicemail facility, then that is a step forward, and it goes to ensuring that nothing is left unsaid by the caller. In large organizations, if you only have a few receptionists or operators taking messages, then they get very busy and sometimes they don't take the correct information. Let's take a look now at some barriers that can build up when we try to communicate. We know that people resist being told that they have to do anything. And here are a few expressions that you need to think about. They may be expressions that you use. They may be expressions that are your habit in the way you speak on the telephone to somebody. So I'd like you to just take a moment and look at these expressions. These expressions on the left also imply that you are of a certain nature. It implies certain characteristics about you. So let's go through these so you can understand more about what not to do and what to do in very good telephone communication. When you use the expression, hold on, it might mean that you actually don't care about the other person so much. It means that you are indifferent. The better way of saying that sort of thing, instead of using hold on, is to say this on the right-hand side. Do you mind waiting while I check that for you? This shows that you are caring rather than being indifferent. So now you understand how we will go through this together. Also, let's look at, you'll have to check with Mr. X. You'll have to check. So this means that you really are a little bit indifferent towards that person. You're demanding that they're going to have to do something. The preferable way of saying that is on the right-hand side. You could say, Mr. X is handling that matter. May I have him get in touch with you? Here you are leaving more of a positive message. Let's look at the left side again. And here you see the question, are you arbitrary? Meaning that are you just demanding and making decisions of what the caller has to do? If you say things like this, you have to, you need to, that implies that kind of characteristic or behavior. So on the right-hand side, it would be better to use this. Will you please ask Mr. Jones to call Mr. B? Rather than saying you have to ask Mr. Jones to call Mr. B, you could say, will you please ask Mr. Jones to call Mr. B? So here you are lending a better tone, a better positive feeling to your communication. On the left-hand side again, we have a question. Are you tactless? That means, are you very blunt and very direct If you say things like, who's calling? What is your name? Or what's your name? Those things are very blunt and they're really not very respected. These kinds of expressions are certainly going to get you into trouble because they're not very respected at all. And indeed, they come across being very, very rude. So the idea is that you change the way you say that. You consider saying something like this. May I tell her who's calling, please? Or you could say, may I ask your name? So here we see how you have changed something that's very tactless and blunt into something that's very, very positive. Next, just take a look on the left-hand side at the bottom, and we can see, are you casting reflections? Here, you're showing that you don't really care about what you're saying about the other person. For example, you might say, I don't know where he is, or he hasn't come in yet, or he's still out to lunch. You could say things and turn it around to be better by using these phrases. Mr. X isn't in the office just now. May I have him call you later? You can turn those negatives or those rather condescending kind of expressions about someone that might get them into trouble actually. You could turn them into something more positive and break down your barriers to communicating very, very well. Some of these things we have gone through previously when we looked at the kinds of ways that you can rephrase what you want to say to a caller. Generally, the rule is that you try to make things positive. You try to turn negatives into positives to make the caller feel very good. Remember, your professionalism here is up for show, and people are going to consider you very carefully purely by what you say on that telephone, as well as the way you say it and the tone that is in your voice. Let's take a look now at voicemail. There are many benefits to voicemails, and to having a facility that you can use on your desk. You don't have to rely on the human factor, so to speak. So if you are making or leaving a voicemail, then make sure that your message is polite, it's direct, and it's businesslike. That is what you have to do. Never scream your message into the person's voicemail. Make sure that also it can be understood very clearly. And also, if you have a lot of mails coming in, then return telephone calls back very promptly. The way to work with voicemail is that you are professional at all times. So it's there for a purpose, not just to collect and receive messages. You've got to actually listen to those messages and return any calls promptly that you need to return. The things that you do not do on voicemail. And remember, voicemail systems are monitored in organizations. So do remember that point. It's just like emails as well. Emails are monitored on certain systems in companies. So do not do these things with voicemail. Don't make crude or rude comments. These are things that you have to be very, very careful of, because other people might have to listen to that voicemail depending on circumstances. Also, don't have music playing in the background. When you need to leave a message, go somewhere where it's quiet. People will get confused. They won't be able to hear the message, and it doesn't sound very professional. So close your door or go to a quiet place if you are out somewhere where you can be careful and follow the right things of the voicemail system and leave out the background noise. Also, if you find that you're walking along a street and it's very, very noisy, don't really answer your phone sometimes when you're walking in a noisy traffic area, or even leave a message. You do need to go into the lobby of a building or somewhere that is relatively quiet, because otherwise it does seem very unprofessional when the person at the other end receives that message and all they hear is blee blah, blee blah, noise going on, and they wonder, where on earth are they? Why are they calling me in that situation? So don't have music playing or any other disturbing traffic noise, for example, in the background. And also, when you're looking at voicemails, do not use multiple people when recording the greeting. Sometimes you hear that. You hear a change in voice on certain voicemail systems, and it doesn't sound like it's the same person speaking. You have to make sure when you record that message, record your greeting, that you are using just one voice. Do remember not to hide behind voicemail. Don't start to use it as a habit to answer your phones. You do need to answer your phones when at all possible, but you only use voicemail when you are not able, for reason of meetings or visiting guests or whatever, to be able to take that call. Let's take a look now at your voicemail greeting. On your system, try to record your own personal greeting, definitely if it's on your own mobile phone. Sometimes this cannot be avoided in your office. For example, it's a little bit difficult, and there are certain professionals that do record voicemail greetings for major firms. So don't use the standard default greeting or have another person record your greeting, because people, when they call you, they expect to hear your voice, even on the voicemail. That really is a very good way of increasing your telephone etiquette. You're taking into consideration the person who's making that call and leaving the message. Another point in actually making your greeting or designing your greeting is certainly writing down what you want to say and practice saying it a few times before recording. Now, unless you are very, very good and you speak very well, you are going to make mistakes. So take a little bit of time to do this. And also, be sure that you include in that greeting your name and your department so that people know that they've reached the right place. They've reached the correct person. Of course, on your mobile phone, you can also say the number of your mobile phone so that they've got the right person as well. Do ensure that your regular greeting should include your normal work hours, if you want to indicate that in your greeting message. This, of course, is if you are going to be recording on your major company system. Also remember, there is a feature that allows the caller to reach another person in your department from your voicemail if you aren't in. So if you have that feature, use it. That way, the caller is being helped immediately, and it's saving extra time and effort for them to call back, or for you to call them. So this attendant feature is very useful, and check out if it is available. That certainly is a very efficient method of taking care of your callers. So voicemail greetings. Remember, the tone of your voice when you record is very important. Speak clearly. All of the things that we have mentioned, do take note of. Don't rush your recorded greeting message. Speak in a moderate pace, and make sure that it's in a friendly but a businesslike tone. Maybe from this moment on you might like to go back and listen to your voicemail greeting on your own system or on your own mobile telephone. And indeed, if you want to, just wipe it and re-record it and make it even better. It could be that you've found out from this particular part of our program that you have ways that you can make your own greeting much, much better. So therefore, go and do that. Some etiquette about voicemail. Do make sure you check your messages daily. and return them within 24 hours. This is absolutely important. And I would even go further to check them regularly, every 2 hours or so, depending on the nature of your business and depending on where you are. Sometimes you can check your voicemail messages from your mobile telephone. So a lot of this technology is available. So make the best use of what the technology can provide. Also, in checking messages and returning calls, reply or forward or delete messages immediately. Don't leave them hanging around on your system or hanging around in your mobile phone. They can build up very, very quickly, and then you find that you're out of capacity or you need to delete, and that takes time. So do things immediately as they happen. If you want to reply, if you want to forward that message on, or if you want to delete it. Also, don't forget, forwarding things on, this sort of activity does need explanation to who you're forwarding it to. That is courteous. That is just being polite and mindful of them. So be sure to explain to the person to whom you are forwarding the message that you are sending it on to them. Otherwise, they'll get it and they'll think, oh, you didn't even explain this. You didn't even tell me in advance. Remember, this is just like forwarding emails as well. Be courteous, be mindful of the other person. If you need to leave a voicemail message for another person, when you have to leave a message for someone to return your telephone call, try to have the correct pronunciation of their name and make sure you do the following. In our sum up to this particular session on voicemail, these are some things you do need to follow. Speak clearly and speak slowly. Be sure to leave your name and your extension number. And it's best to say it at the beginning and the end. Just repeat it so nothing is lost. Do maintain short messages and to-the-point messages, because there is a limited amount of time on that recorder to be able to give your message. Indeed, some systems do say you have 2 minutes in which to give your message. Please begin now. So be mindful of the time factor here. And also don't forget, you do want to leave the person that you are calling with a good impression of you. So that will also come out in the way you leave your message. All the things we talked about, tone, inflection, the things you say. Don't forget to leave the date and the time you called in the message. That really does indicate, especially if you're traveling between different countries. It is important here to specify where you are and what the time is in that particular country. And let the person know the best time to call you back. Giving these facts are very, very helpful in leaving voicemails, because then everything is very clear. And you're giving a lot of information just in the space of your voicemail message. The final point to remember when you're leaving a voicemail message is cover one topic in a message and specify what you want the recipient to do. Don't go on with 3 or 4 topics, because then you run out of time and it becomes complicated, and the caller or the person who's going to get that message really is going to get very confused, and they'll just say, well, oh, forget it, I'll wait for him to call me back. So you haven't really gained anything from leaving that message. So do follow these points. If you stick to them, then you'll find that things will go very smoothly, that your communication will be very professional. And this is really what you're aiming for when it comes to telephone etiquette. Being the professional that you are, making sure that the image of your company is certainly not tarnished in any way, and that you come across as knowing what you're talking about. In this sum up, I hope that you've gained some more very valuable tips. Thank you very much for your attention.